Hi, everyone. Thank you to the organizers for inviting me in this very high-profile event. I need to have a switch for the slides. So I'm a non-executive director with Green Energy Group. For those that you don't know the group, it's one of the few vertically integrated groups in Cyprus, currently offering production, engineering, and supply of renewable energy. Today, I aim to cover the topic of the momentum of renewables of Cyprus and how it can contribute to the sustainability of the energy markets. It's something that has already been touched on by the minister before and the previous speakers, but hopefully we can get to a bit more depth in this presentation. Now, as with every member state, the EU has set Cyprus key targets for contribution by renewable energy sources, with a key objective being 23% renewable contribution in its national energy consumption by 2030. Sector-specific targets are 26% contribution in electricity consumption, 39% in heating and cooling, and 14% in the transportation sector. However, in March this year, the EU agreed to increase its EU-wide target from 32% to 42.5%. As a result, it is expected that the Cyprus target will also be increased to 30% renewable contribution by 2030. And now these are the targets that we need to achieve. But what about history? How well has Cyprus been doing to date? Actually, for the equivalent 2020 targets, which was at 13%, Cyprus exceeded that target and achieved 16.9%. It has also exceeded its other sector targets, apart from the transportation target, which was at 10% and seems to be the most challenging target to achieve for Cyprus, but also for Europe in general. Now, looking at the historic data, and in terms of energy production, this is the data that was presented by the Cyprus Electricity Authority of Cyprus, which is the regulator for the energy markets. We see that the renewable share in total energy production was approximately 18% as of 2022. We see a steep increase after 2018, which is solely driven by solar, as shown from the graph on the right. After the initial feed-in tariff policies ended in 2016, any new renewable production had to be sold to the open market. Given that it was clear that the final competitive energy market would not be ready for some time, and still is not ready today, the then Minister of Energy wisely proposed a transitional market where renewable projects would initially be able to sell to EAC. EAC is the Electricity Authority of Cyprus, a government-owned entity that controls the conventional energy production at the moment, at the EAC's wholesale price, and thereafter to the open market through bilateral PPA contracts with licensed energy suppliers. This gave future renewable investments a framework to not only continue, but also take off, as we see from the data on these graphs. The other question is, why is solar the only dominating force driving this growth? Well, hydro is not possible because there are no big rivers in Cyprus. Biofuels are limited. In terms of wind, as we know, wind turbine technology is expensive, and to be financially sustainable, it needs consistent and strong wind speeds, which unfortunately Cyprus doesn't have. To the contrary, in terms of solar, there are approximately 3,000 hours of sunshine annually. As a result, at least we at Green Energy Group, we don't believe there will be any other wind projects in Cyprus, at least not onshore. Now, from this history, how do we manage to achieve the new EU target set by the EU? Where the Transmission System Operator of Cyprus, or TSO, released last month its 10-year plan for upgrading the grid and substations, as well as information on future energy production and installed capacity. Looking at the graph on the left, we see the TSO's projections of installed capacity in megawatt to be connected to the grid. In gray, we see the conventional power stations powered by fossil fuels, which have a small increase in 2027 and then remain stable. To the contrary, we see that renewables are expected to double, with an increase of 602 megawatts just for solar over a period of 9 years. Now, what is the key drivers of this projected aggressive growth? Well, firstly, we already mentioned is that the new EU targets are more aggressive, and actually we need to increase our renewable contribution in the energy mix. Secondly, the TSO is projecting a robust growth in energy demand until 2030, which manifests into projected growth in energy production as shown from the graph on the left. And you can see that the graph on the left is a pretty much good correlation to the GDP of the country, which shows that the positive GDP growth outlook is very good. The combination of these two factors are creating this projected increase. Now, we'll attempt to quantify this. And we see here that on the graph on the left, we see at the top that this TSO predicts approximately 1,212 megawatt of renewable installed capacity by 2030. However, we estimate that the renewable installed capacity that is needed to achieve the new EU targets of 30% renewables to be at 1,365 megawatt, a whopping 700 megawatt increase of installed capacity from this year. Now, taking a few assumptions here and assuming that this needs to be covered predominantly by solar, as explained previously, and assuming that approximately 150 megawatt will be attributed to net metering and net billing systems, in the absence of other groundbreaking energy sources like hydrogen, as was mentioned before, this means we will need over 500 megawatt of additional PV parks that in money this translates in over $500 million investment just for solar parks, ignoring the infrastructure investments that need to take place. Now, is it possible to achieve this? And the minister touched on this before. We at Green Energy Group see that the investor appetite is there, the capital is there, and obviously the climate conditions are there. But we need to make sure that the current structure and infrastructure problems need to be addressed. Firstly is the grid. As mentioned, we need the improvement of the whole network. This includes changing existing lines, adding new ones, and also changing the existing route network. We need to move forward with the implementation of smart grid technology that will allow for two-way communication between users and production, making data available to monitor consumption needs in real time, routing power where needed, minimizing outages, and minimizing the use of less efficient and more expensive power production. Now, for these two challenges, the grid and the smart grid, we at Green Energy Group feel that a breakup of the DSO and the TSO, who are the owners and operators of the grid, from EAC ownership is vital to make them operate truly independently and move fast. Third are the substations. Obviously, we need to increase the capacity of the regional substations. Currently, almost all substations that are not in residential areas are either close to or at full capacity. This means that new PV parks have very limited available capacity to connect to. We need to start the process of upgrading the process imminently. Fourth is storage, which was already mentioned. Obviously, this is a big problem, but it's also a big investment opportunity. As you know, demand for electricity is at its lowest in spring and autumn due to the reduced use of air conditioning and heating. However, unfortunately, this happens to be a very productive period for PV systems. As a result, supply exceeds demand during this period, and with no storage capability, this energy is lost. This currently results in energy curtailments for PV parks at a time where green energy is meant to be promoted and encouraged. Lastly is the energy demand structure. We need to move demand of energy to match PV supply times, which normally is during the day. Two examples could be, one is the introduce incentives for electric vehicle charging points during the day, and a second one would be to the installation of smart air conditioning systems. Now, we want to be fair to the government, and the minister already mentioned some initiatives he's been taking, and I will take the opportunity to list them here as well. One is the TSO, as mentioned previously, announced a 10-year plan for the upgrading of the grid. Second, the government is now giving the opportunity to investors of future PV parks to contribute for the upgrading of relevant local substations. However, this is a timeline of 3 to 4 years, and we believe the government needs to move faster. Third is the establishment of a single service or a one-stop shop to expedite the licensing process of renewable projects. There is an expectation for an announcement of a grant of approximately 80 million for the promotion of large energy storage systems, which we understand has to be undertaken by the private sector. And lastly, a 35 million fund has been established for the installation of smart meters in residential homes. Now, if the above are not implemented on time, especially the grid upgrade and the storage technology that was mentioned before, We at Green Energy Group expect that there will be a cap on new renewables after 2025 because there will not be capacity for them to be installed, which will limit the increase from today's installed capacity at an increase of only 250 megawatt. Even though this is still a sizable increase, we believe that not meeting our EU targets will be an environmental failure on our part as a country. Now, to conclude, renewables, and specifically solar, is the future of environmental and financial energy sustainability in Cyprus. The private sector is ready to execute on the vision, and the climate conditions are there. The government, along with the private sector, need to work together as fast as possible to make sure the infrastructure is there also. And thank you for that.